What does the government want from you when they ask for your financial statements? Let's say you get into legal trouble, right? Specifically, let's talk about the FTC. When it comes time to settling a case with them, this is the part which I don't love. I'm not a fan of the way that this goes down, but it is what it is. And it's basically when you say, okay, fine, you think there's damages from what I did, tell me how much, what do you want to fine me? And they basically say, well, what do you got? And that question to me is scary as hell, right? And so they say, well, before we could talk about a settlement, we want a list of everything you've got. Probably one of the scariest things you'll ever submit in your life is a list of everything you've got, knowing that the person you're giving it to has full intention of taking as much of it, if not all of it. But God forbid you don't disclose every ounce of it, it gets worse. So you're cornered, you're trapped. And so I wanted to do an episode with Greg because Greg said he's seen some changes and some evolution. And what we're going to talk about was, how does that process work? How does the financial disclosure process work? God forbid you get in trouble. My assumption is whatever the FTC does is probably similar to how the SEC or the other agencies function. None of what we're about to do, this is a big disclosure disclaimer, nothing that we're talking about here has even remotely, even 1%, the layer of hiding, or we're not showing you how to do any of that because that's the last thing you should ever do. When this thing came to me, I was like, dude, I am disclosing everything. I don't care. I mean, it's too late. I'm not messing around with this thing. So, but it's good for you to know what they're most interested in and what they're not. And let me explain to you why this is so powerful, and I'm going to let Greg on. The other attorney I was working with sent me what the FTC wanted us to fill out and said, fill it out, let me know, and I'll send it in. My heart skips a beat right now just thinking what the hell would have happened to me had I done that. And by the way, what I filled out was exactly the same as I would have filled out, but I gave it to Greg. And Greg asked some damn questions that were super important. For example, you have a house. What's your house worth? I would have written its worth. Well, that's great. What about your mortgage against the house? That goes as a negative, right? Well, I don't know this stuff. I'm not a financial analyst. I would have just said, and so what Greg came in and did, I always joke with Greg. I'm like, partly I loved what he did because it got me to a more fair number, which was more reflective of my truthful, honest situation. It also made me depressed for a week because I thought I was pretty much broke. But
you said that to me. Man, I thought I had net worth and I'm broke.
I know. I wrote back to Greg. I thought I was doing pretty good, but oh my God, how am I going to feed my children? And Greg's like, oh, calm down.
Like, bro, they're third world countries. You're not, they're
yeah. So Greg, what have you seen? What's going on? Like, what do they ask for? What do they look for? And how can that help people that are listening right now?
So I'm getting a lot of questions now what a FTC investigation or settlement looks like. Not that you ever want to go through it. Remember, our first defense is good advertising, right? Good, clean advertising, good, truthful communications. Get people in your door, in your funnel that have an understanding of the expectations. They know the risks. They know the potential rewards. They're not guarantees that are over the top. They understand what you're trying to train them and provide them, okay? That's your best defense. After you get in there, there may be some mitigating steps. We have document retention policies, and we make sure we keep things for a certain period of time and just get rid of the rest, and we just go forward, right? Nothing nefarious, just part of business, right? The very last we call the keep of the kingdom, right? If you're in a castle, the keep was the point of the last, stand, the Alamo, basically. This is your point of the last position of your defense. At that point, we look at what we call like an asset protection plan or some sort of strategy. But you can't really come up with a strategy if you don't understand what the FTC is going to look at or a regulatory body is going to look at. Now, Onyx said something really important. You never lie about financials. It's one of the ways the FTC can reopen investigations or cases if they discover that you've lied about your financials. So his statement about being truthful about the information contained in there is absolutely correct. And I'm not going to share information as a way of trying to hide or deceive the government, but there are legitimate things you can do if you understand, if you get in that position, what they're going to look at. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about what are they looking at and why, and what works and what doesn't work. Well, I'm in a case right now where the client went, and I've had several cases, right? I had a case where somebody set up a Cook Islands trust because they were told by the attorney, you spend tens of thousands of dollars, this will protect your assets from being taken by the government in case of an investigation. Didn't work at all. FTC knew about it before I knew about it. And I actually didn't disclose it because I didn't know about it. And then I got upset with my client for not disclosing it. They did eventually. They go, oh, I didn't realize this attorney told me this. And I kind of bought it, but I didn't. I was like, you're trying to hide. But we mea culpa. Sorry, here it is. And that's how we played. And we settled the case. Now, the case I'm in now, same thing. Hired a really big law firm. You go to their website, said, we can protect your assets from anything, including the government. I'm telling you, the ridicule that I'm hearing from the commission on this is great. They look at that as like, but this firm made a lot of money setting up asset protection that didn't ever help this client in the middle of this investigation, didn't help in a regulatory action. So, what will help? So, understanding what they're looking for. So, when they bring in action, they will look at two different financial disclosures. The first set of disclosures, which is almost 25 pages in length, everybody, this completely is 50 pages in length. So, this is detailed stuff, right? The first disclosure is personal financial statement. And where a lot of people make a mistake, and Onik was part of that, is that they want to go through and they want to put what their best foot forward is in their net worth, but they don't look at the liabilities that go into it. I look at like an accountant or an analyst does, where I'm trying to be a forensic analyst about what's going on. So I look at it critically. So a lot of the things I look at is like, okay, what are your assets? But then I'm like, what are your liabilities? But I don't stop there. I look at it like one of the financial disclosures I looked at recently, they put like $50 a month for food. And this is a family with young kids. And I was like, no way, go to your wife. Ask her what she's spending on a monthly basis for clothes and food. And came back, it was like 10 times what they had listed on there, right? So you have to look at it legitimately. So one of the things that you can go through and do this, and Anik and I actually have a service that we're rolling out next year. I'm not trying to piss you, but we've been talking about this a long time, is to actually go through the scenario of going through a financial disclosure together with our clients. We send them and then we treat them the way the commission treats them in getting financial documents and going through and pushing you like you're going through an investigation. So you understand what the process is. Because if once we get that financial disclosure done, we can do what I'm doing. Okay, you've listed all these assets. What about these liabilities? So you can be really head to head on what you're looking at your actual net worth is. Plus, okay, listen, you've got these assets here. This is just cash. This is just money to be taken. Is there a REIT or a long-term investment pool that you can invest in that can get some of this cash out of your possession that's there? Now, does that in absolute defense the government can take it? No, but if it's not liquid, it's very difficult, right? So there are little mechanisms you can put into place that can really add a protection for you if you understand the scope of the way that they look at this investigation. So these financial disclosures, the personal one, big failure of a lot of clients, they don't look at their liabilities. Now, one of the things they have to list is all your credit cards, right? Because they want to know what those are. Well, when you go through an investigation, what's one of the first things that happens with the government is they send a notice to who? Your merchant processing company, Stripe, if you're using that, Maverick, whatever the merchant processing is, and they send it to your credit card companies. Okay. So if they're doing merchant processing, what do you think your clients are going to do if your merchant processing stops and you're not able to service the clients because you don't have money to service the clients? What do you think they're going to do? You know what the answer. What would you think your clients would do on it? Chargebacks, exactly. Cancellations and chargebacks. So here I'm doing an analysis for a client recently. I won't say who. They're talking about what their credit cards are. And I was like, come on, we need to look at what your cancellations are. Because my guess is in the last 6 to 8 weeks, those have just gone, and those are all liabilities. And you're eating it on your credit cards. So we need to list those as liabilities because that's going to offset net worth. And we got to foresee what that's going to be long term because they've taken your ability to be able to service clients. And what happens in every case? If they shut down the company and they don't leave resources to take care of customer service, people get pissed off and then they want their money back. Whether they're entitled or they were pissed off before or they weren't, they're going to be pissed off now because you can't service their needs. And when that happens, if they can't get money directly from you, They go to your credit card company, the merchant processor, and they try to get money back there. But that becomes a liability for you. So all of a sudden, you take something that is a huge negative, right? No doubt. But you didn't impose that. It's not self-inflicted. The courts imposed that on you, or maybe the government did. You got to offset. It becomes a liability. And you forget that. That's a huge risk, right? If you left that off, you're going to eat that. So this is what we do. So you look at the personal financials, but then it goes into corporate. And then corporate, you got to list every company that has situs connection to that company is. And if you fail to list them off and the FTC finds out that, or regulatory body finds out about it, even if it's an old business you thought was way gone, or a cryptocurrency business that you thought you'd shut down that's still there, and they find out, it makes you look like you're lying to them. And
Yeah.
then that hurts your credibility in negotiations for settlement because they think you're being deceptive. So,
I
oh, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I've been dying to give this one example, everybody, because so I have this one investment, all right, and I'll try to go into as much detail as I can, everyone, while still protecting some of my personal stuff here. But I have this one investment. Then let's just say it's invested in such a way that there's a state government that has oversight over that as well. So whatever we do with that money, pull out, take out, invest, the state government has to first approve of that use. Okay. Also, there's a huge tax liability if we shut it down and pull that money out. So when it came time to disclose, I have to disclose that, and I will. It's in my control, even though it's sitting in a corporation, but that corporation is owned by me. Now, I would have just disclosed, here's how much is in there. And what Greg said is, well, hold on a sec. If we pull it out, I said, oh, yeah, oh my God, I'd have to pay like
What's
30
your
plus percent.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. What's the surrender value was the word he ended up using. And I said, well, shoot, you're right. I'd have to pay 30% in taxes. And then I thought, wait a minute, hold on. Let me call the company that administers this for us. I called them and they're like, whoa, 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 you can't legally even touch half of it. I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, there's a state mandate. You won't be able to, you can't just pull it all out. And I was like, oh, well, shoot, I didn't know that, right? So that money can be invested, but it cannot be pulled out. And so that was something that we were able to go to. Greg was able to say, and so all of a sudden I'm like, see, I didn't know that, right? And Greg was able to say, hey, here's what's there, and here is the tax liability that would be incurred, and here is the state rule that would allow. Mind you, they did want proof of all of those statements. I mean, I had also made investments that are not liquid. I don't have access to the funds. I legally don't have them. I'm an LP, limited partner in these investments. And so they asked, they said, okay, well, prove it. And so we went to the fund and got a letter from them saying like, screw off. You don't get your money right now. And we submitted that. And so, but I would have just simply disclosed I have that asset, and they would have been like, great, but I have no way of liquidating it. I don't have access to it. So that was why I jokingly said, like, Greg basically made me feel poor. But at the same time, we disclosed all of it. It's all there. It's just like, hey guys, for the following reasons, we can't access it. And they were amenable to that. I mean, it looked like they got that. They just wanted proof, but then they got it. So anyways, back to why you have to do this. Please, please, please do not fill these out. And also, please, please, please don't just give it to any attorney. I only know Greg. You need Greg because Greg's got that financial background. So the kinds of questions he asked me, I mean, honestly, it's made me look at my financial statements differently, just regardless. Like I look at stuff differently thanks to the time that we had together. But yeah, sorry, go back to you, Greg, what you're seeing.
No, I'm just saying you're looking at the assets but not the liabilities, and you forget about things. And it's hard because some things you won't remember. You're like, oh, I had this and this, but you have to be as detailed as possible. Now, the problem is if you're dealing with an investigation like I did with Onic and Learn, you have time. It takes weeks for those financial disclosures. When they get an asset freeze, they want that like day one. And they've had a year to think about this case, and you're backpedaling the entire time. You're trying to throw things away, and a lot of times you lose access to things. So then there's an asset freeze. They appoint a receiver. The receiver takes over all of your accounts. So now you can't pull up on your online bank's statements and look at that. So what I tell clients in advance is you should get in the habit of downloading your bank statements and everything and having possession on your own personal computers. I'm not saying you want an asset freeze or you want, believe me, if that's the case, we've all failed. But in case it happens, the key is you retain tangible digital copies of everything on your own computers so that you can get access to that. Like one of the questions in a financial disclosure is, what is your income that you've had for that? Now, here, I'm going to call out you guys marketers. I'm going to call you out. I can't tell you the number of marketers I represent that fail to file their taxes. I don't know why, but it seems like, and it's not just 1 year, like we're late filing for last year, like 3 or 4 years. And the FTC looks at this and is like, yep, you're not a legitimate business. We knew it all along. You don't even
Yeah.
file your own taxes. You're showing to the government you're not acting like a business. Regular businesses, they file their taxes. And when you don't do that, and then you're guessing, then they ask you one of the questions, what was your income? And you're like, oh, a lot of us can go and say, well, our taxable income was this. You don't have a tax return filed, you're screwed. Because then you have to go back and you have to go through QuickBooks or Quicken or whatever digital bookkeeping service you're using. Or if you don't have that, they look at your receipts in your bank account. And that becomes gross receipts across the board. You're just telling the government, guess what? This is what I made. The gross money I brought in was actually my income. Because why? I didn't file my taxes. What, you guys don't have 10 grand to go and hire a CPA to go and take care of your taxes. And I'm not saying it's going to be that much, but that's the short-sightedness that some of these companies, they're generating millions of dollars in annual revenue and they don't hire a competent accountant to be able to file their taxes on time. You got to make sure that you do that. I mean, I'm just telling you, like, I deal with the government on this and it's an eye roll. It's like another e-commerce coaching business that doesn't file their taxes. It just shows to them that this isn't legitimate. And if you're
Yeah.
doing that and you're doing it yourself, no. You need a third party credible CPA firm that's going to come in and audit, do financials for you as you run your business. You just need to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so they are looking for liquidity. Here's something that I get all the time, Greg. People say, "Well, I'm good. I have trusts. They can't access my trusts." So how
Yeah,
does that work?
they pierce through that Cook Island trust like that. They're going through a case right now. They had an asset protection trust, and we haven't gone and litigated the issue in court because, we'll be honest, client doesn't have the money because the assets are all frozen. So, including the assets in the trust. So, I'd love to fight it, go into court. In the Zurich's case, one of the defendants had an irrevocable trust. It never got that far. But again, another asset freeze. You'd have to have a
But
case asset freeze.
you still have to disclose it, right, Greg? Like, I mean, in the financial disclosure, if I have a trust that I have access to the capital of. So here's my answer to people. My answer to people is this. Fine. I'll give that to you. I mean, it's not true, but I'm going to concede the argument and say they can't access your trust. But you still have to disclose it.
Right.
And as long as you have to disclose it, they won't settle with you when they know that's there. And their settlement amount will include that money. So if you're like, well, you can't access it, they'll say, okay, you access it. We don't need to access it. That's a problem for later if we sue you and win and then get permission from court. You're right. It might be a little bit tough, but if you want to settle, we're not going to settle without the inclusion of those assets. And so right there, your entire argument has fallen apart. The only way you could possibly believe that your trust completely and holistically protects you is if you didn't have to disclose it, which is not true. That would be a flat out lie. So if you have a trust, you have money you've put away for your kids or whatever, revocable, irrevocable, Cook Island, Delaware, and it doesn't matter. You have to disclose it. As long as they know about it, they know it's liquid capital there that they can, and so it's just going to be a part of your negotiation. I mean, we had properties, and I was like, look, I don't have access to that money. And they're like, well, you don't have access to it right now, but you do eventually, so we're going to include that in your assets. Because we had investments in like whatever real estate that was locked up, but it was ours, wholly ours. Well, we weren't LPs in it. And so I just want everyone to understand something. Just because you have a trust, it literally doesn't mean much for the purposes of what we're talking about. So Greg, liquidity is what they look for. Here's a question I have for you. During my time, you told me, hey, they don't really like to do like payment plans and they want their money now. But we did start to see, like even in my case, they gave us a choice. They're like, okay, if you want to, you know, we're willing to take payment up to a year from now, but then it'll be at this much, right? You're going to pay more. And are they softening to the idea of payment plans in the sense of like higher settlement amounts and pay pay them for longer? Are you seeing more settlements that have that included? I know in the Zurich case, I think it was the Zurich case, they had a year to like sell properties and stuff, but
That was response.
response. Sorry. Okay. Sorry. Yeah.
So that was unique. I've never seen that before. I haven't seen it after. I've had one case where they gave me a period of time, and that was because we were trying to liquidate a rental property, and they agreed, but we were able to close and sell that property within a month or so. So we didn't need the time. We were able to meet the original requirements. So
So there's still more of like, give us what we get now, and let's get this case over with. Um,
yeah, in the case with the local trust that I'm dealing with right now, the client didn't disclose it initially because he didn't think he had to because of the advice of the earlier counsel. It wasn't until it got involved and I was like, yeah, you better dang well because the FTC found it and they were like, what is this? And I was like,
yeah.
and he did. He wasn't trying to do anything wrong. He listened to what counsel had said before and didn't think it was applicable. And
Yeah.
so it is like you got to disclose everything. You don't want to hide. It's better to disclose and then do what we're saying, which is position yourself in a. Now, again, I hope none of you are in this situation. I hope none of you go through an asset freeze, but it happens to be that individuals who have listened to our podcast have been subject to asset freezes. And we gave the same advice, like good transparent marketing, do everything right, treat your customer like gold, take care of them. If they're upset, refund their money. Like do all the business things that good businesses do for their clients. But in case you've done all that, and the government still has it. And this was the question I got, and I think I mentioned this to you on it, and I'll say this again. I don't know. There's no crystal ball who the government is going to bring an action against. The field is right. They could go after a lot of people that we see on the internet right now. Why they take action against one and I couldn't tell you. I think there are elements and there are key triggers that are out there that we can talk about, like complaints and chargebacks and issues with other lawsuits where you kind of get pulled into because another party that you're doing business with gets sued. But without that said, they could wake up one day, see your advertisement, somebody doesn't like it, you could be their next target for that if you're not following the rules. Everything we're talking about in the book, in the Compliance Academy, and what we talk about here are ways to, one, stay off the radar, and if not, then to have legitimate defenses to be able to fight in case of that. If they get through all of this and there's an asset freeze like we've been talking about it today, this last ditch attempt, if you do it correctly. Now, if you don't know how to do this and we're sending things that confuse you, and like I said, we're offering a product where we're going to do it. It's more expensive. It's not your standard, hey, what it is. It's not a promise of get out of jail free stuff. It's
No.
let's do an analysis of where you're at so you can make decisions in advance in the hope that you have good marketing and good compliance and everything else, that if it ever were, heaven forbid,
Yeah.
happen, you'd have something, you'd have another defense. That's all we're
It's
saying.
an exposure plan. It's an exposure plan. It's one, I'll tell you guys right now, I haven't been talking that much about it, but next year for the right people, I'm going to be jamming it down your throats because the level of knowledge you'll gain in my entire, I don't know, it took us 18 months or so to settle. In that entire journey, I learned more. Of course, I learned throughout the journey, which translated into this book with Greg, but I think the place where I had the most like moment was at the end when I was sitting down with Greg and going through my personal financial statement and understanding, look, you can set up as many trusts as you want, you can set up, but it isn't until that you've got the gun to the head that you start to really understand, right, what you're exposed. You have to have the exposure. And so now I understood, like, okay, this will change in some of the ways how I invest. Nothing nefarious. Just I now understand asset protection better. I now understand not just, I mean, I had a super creditor come after me. I had someone that has the most access. And I think there's that knowledge I'd love for people to the point where Greg doesn't know this yet, but there's a book in our future, Greg, that I want to write that, that talks about some of the things that you should be doing in investing. So
Or your
anyways,
assets. Assets. Right? So
yeah, it's don't lose your ass.
it's
Don't lose your ass. Or don't lose your assets.
yeah.
Awesome stuff. Greg, anything else you want to get out before we wrap up this episode?
No, I just want to say this. I don't know if we're going to have a chance to do another podcast before the end of the year, but just a time of reflection. We're super grateful for everybody paying attention and watching this stuff. I know that you're listening and you're part of the choir now, right? And we appreciate your loyalty to us and actually participating with us this year.
Yeah. So we'll have one more episode. Ironically, that'll release on December 31st.
Let's do it.
So I'll have to I'll have to woo your wife to ask her to let you go away for one more episode. You're probably gonna be at your cabin. Let me guess. You're gonna be at
But
your
we
cabin.
got the Wi-Fi.
You got
We're all-
Wi-Fi.
we're
I'm gonna
ready.
test it.
I'm ready.
I don't know, man. I don't believe you. Let's see.
My
Time will,
Sunday Xbox streaming the whole night to see works like a charm.
I will believe it when I see it. Everyone, I want to echo what Greg just said. Thank you very much. This has been. I'm just gonna say this. It's not been an easy journey by any means. And I really want everyone to fully understand the level of money and time and energy and heart that both Greg and I have invested, and our teams. There's a big shout out to all of our teams. Everyone's making a huge sacrifice. This has not been a moneymaker. This is not profitable. We have lost. We're in the negative by a lot. But we continue to do it because for some reason we're insane and the mission drives us and the message drives us. But we wouldn't be able to do it without you. And so we really appreciate you. I think we're getting close to 4,000 books sold, I think. No, sorry, we're getting close to 3,000. We're about to cross 3,000 books sold. And we have other books in the process. So love you guys. Thank you very much. We'll see you one more time before the end of the year. Stay safe. Have a great, great, great holidays with your family. And if you're looking for a great Christmas gift, what better than this beautiful, amazing book that brings massive joy into the lives of marketers? Ho, ho, ho. Yes. All right. Love you all. Thank you so much. Links in the description there, Greg. Have a great Christmas, my friend, and have a blast. We'll see you all later. Thank you. Bye.